Welcome back, people. You are listening to SeeThroughPanel, a comic book discussion and review podcast. My name is Cole Harvey. I'm here with Fahed Rahman.
Hello, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about Mr. Invincible, Local Hero by Pascal Jousselin. I hope.
I just listened to a pronunciation. I think it's Jousselin or Jocelyn. Yeah, something like that. Anyway,
I'm not going to be able to do that.
Okay. So Pascal Jousselin was born in France in 1973. Following studying graphics art studies, he split his time between comic books and illustration works. His first comics were published in 2000 by Triers Étrange, at the time, which was a small Parisian publishing house. He then followed that up with collaborations with Bruno, Steve Baker, and Lionel Schwein, and became a contributor to Fluid Glacial. In 2013, he made a splash by creating the series Mr. Invincible, and I think you'll describe what Mr. Invincible is all about, Cole.
Yes, so I'm just going to read off the back of the book because it's the best description I can find. It says, meet Mr. Invincible, the one and only true comic book superhero. He has the amazing power to bend space and time by breaking the rules of comic books. Panel and page borders can't contain his might. His incredible creative intellect always shows him the most amazing solutions to seemingly insurmountable dangers. He truly is invincible. So this book is, first off, all ages appropriate, which I think is great because we don't cover a lot of all ages books. It is about our main character, Mr. Invincible, whose attire is kind of a yellow shirt with a comic book panel grid on it.
It's kind of very similar to our logo, I have to say.
Yeah, it really is.
A little bit,
It's just yellow and white. It's about it. And he essentially has the power to cross panel borders, to jump from one row of panels to the other row, to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And some other characters in this as well have the power to manifest physical word balloons, to jump from one page to the other side of the page, stuff like that. So it's a very meta book, but it's kind of, it gets you thinking, and it's, once again, it's all ages appropriate, which I think is really cool because it also experiments with the form. And so kids at a young age will realize like this stuff isn't normal and kind of show them how this all works and the internals of it, which I think is cool. How did you feel about this?
I didn't really know what to expect from it. I thought, Cole suggested this like kids comic. What's all that about? And then after reading the first strip, you kind of like get, I see why he suggested it. How did you come across it?
I really don't. I wish I remember. I think it was after the Toppy recording, and okay. I was grabbing some more Toppy stuff from Magnetic Press, and I was just on their website, and I saw this, and I think I just picked it up from there, just kind of curiosity.
Okay, I mean it's a very comic book. When we reviewed In by Will McPhail, I think we both agreed that was a story that would only really work as a comic book. This, this really only would ever be able to work as a comic book. It wouldn't work in any other format. You can a lot of graphic novels. You can see, well, maybe as a novel, maybe as an audio book, maybe as a film. But this very much, it plays around so much of the rules of comic book storytelling. It could only ever work as a comic book. So it's very interesting to see an all age comics that's as cerebral as this. There's a lot of silly jokes in it. There's a lot of like slapstick humor, but it's a very cerebral comic book.
Yeah, it takes a lot. You can read the words and then you'll spend 3 times as long figuring out what actually is happening. So the words aren't, they're funny and there is a story going through it, but really the spectacle for me is the way Pascal kind of moves around the grid and finds different ways to keep this interesting, because jumping from one panel to the other isn't terribly complicated after you've seen it 4 or 5 times, but he just keeps doing different things. And for me, that's really what kept me going through this. It was very funny and I found it super cute, and there was a lot of fun stuff. I think that if a kid was reading this, that would be really really fun for them. But um, I think it's just like a really nice package, and it is kind of one of its kind. And like you said, you can't reproduce something like this in any other medium. It's very, very unique, and I assume was very difficult to make. I mean, just
Yeah,
look
I
at a
mean,
page
I
of this.
can't even begin to comprehend how he came up with the concept for it to start off with. It's like, the word like, original and inventive are kind of thrown around a lot. This truly is really like the idea of having a superhero in a all age comics story isn't particularly original, but the way he's gone about uh, telling it is utterly original. And I think I think I have to use the word genius, uh, because yes, some of the, to have, this would be like a nice thing to do for maybe one strip, but he's got two anthologies of this now, and to keep coming up with new ways to play around with the panel layout format, it takes takes some doing.
Yeah, it really does. I think this must have been just a creative challenge for him or something in the beginning to kind of test him, but he must have really enjoyed it because yeah, he just keeps testing the boundaries of things and introducing new ways to play with the form. He's got there. I've got the physical book here, and there is a page with I would say 1/4 of the top corner of the page is just cut away, and that's for the story. Like a portal has been created, and they actually reproduced it like on the page, so it's shaped differently. And I mean, the story itself is great. The quality of the book, the magnetic press has made, is amazing, and I think that this, I'm not. It says on the back here that it won an award for a comic award for a children's book fair. But I think in terms of the comic world, if this didn't get recognized, I haven't looked. I'm not saying it didn't get recognized, but if it didn't, I think it's a big miss because I think things like this are what really push the medium forward, especially stuff like this targeted at a young age is really really good for getting new readers. They can experiment with what's going on, they can understand how comics are supposed to work. I mean, that's my main pull for this is I just love the audience that it targets.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you've got the physical copy. I've got the digital copy that I'm reading it on Comixology at the moment, and there were some gags that didn't land because I was kind of reading it in portrait mode, and I had to kind of switch to kind of landscape to because there are some gags where he's literally falling in between the pages, like he's in like the
Mm-hmm.
gut, the absolute gut, the gutter section of the, in between the two pages. I was like, what's he doing here? So it's I think this is one I would highly recommend getting the physical copy, because I do think I did initially miss out on some of the gags because I was reading the digital version.
Yeah. How was the jester for digital, the guy that can move through page from one side of the page to the other?
It wasn't too bad. There was I think there was one gag where, as I mentioned, they were moving kind of, I can't remember if it was the jester. I think it might have been one of the jester ones where he's kind of falling in between the different panels, and he's literally in the crease of the page. I imagine that's kind of where he would be. He's kind of like climbing down through one panel on the left hand side to a panel on the right hand side of the page. So yeah, it was okay. But I do think kind of like, it's something we've talked about before, kind of, the difference between physical and digital comics, and I think this is, for me, probably one that it's probably best to kind of read a physical copy of it.
Yeah, I think that is probably true, especially just because, yeah, the things it does with the gutters and going from the front of the page to the back of a page being an actual element, which you never see in comics, makes it a bit weird in digital. I haven't tried it in digital. It definitely probably still was good, but I would
I mean,
agree.
it was definitely still enjoyable once I figured out what I needed to do. It's I think it's quite interesting for as an all age comics. I do think it'll probably require the readers to do quite a bit of work, because usually with all age comics is quite kind of, it's kind of simpler to follow the action. But I think part of the joy in this is kind of like using your brain to figure out how he's got to the destination that he's got to, and kind of like working backwards a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. There, especially with the jester, when I was trying to figure out what his deal was, like a lot of things in this, you have to just kind of figure out for your own how things are going down because it's all visual action. They're not explaining the rules of comics in the lettering. So yeah, I've really had fun watching him just kind of leap from panel to panel, figuring out these different tricks. And my favorites were the single. I don't know about you, but this is kind of broken up into strips with some longer form
Yeah.
recurring characters. I prefer the one-off strips, just like the one-page gag strips. But I did enjoy like the long-running Jester arc and stuff like that.
Yes, I think I think I kind of agree with you there. Who are kind of like your favorite characters? I was quite fond of what's the name of the gentleman that has got powers over speech bubbles? Does he is he given a name in this at all? And kind of him and like 2D boy, who's this kind of like he kind 2D boy very much reminds me of the teenage cashier in the Simpsons. He's got like
Yeah,
a broken voice. He kind of very much gives me gives off that vibe to me. He's like, oh, yeah, Mr. Invincible, I'm your biggest fan. Yeah, that sort of thing going on there. So I was quite fond of him.
I really liked 2D Boy, and then I just looked it up. It's Jack, the guy whose speech bubbles can
Oh yeah,
move stuff. Yeah, they're my two favorite. Besides Mr. Invincible, they're the best. I mean, 2D Boy was hilarious. I love his weird like font size problem in his lettering that he has
yeah,
because his voice is cracky.
yeah,
And his power is really cool. It's a lot easier to figure out, obviously, than Mr. Invincible, but his power is cool. He can like take stuff up from 2D space and bring it into 3D space. So if there's a tree in the distance, he can pick up the tree and he'll have a tiny tree in his hand. It's very interesting.
yeah. I think yeah. It's fascinating how he really does play around with the format. I kind of also when I saw the design from Mister Invincible, kind of I wasn't too sure what the creator was going for with it in terms of he's got a very kind of schlubby kind of like you know midriff spread kind of like going on. He's not kind of like this ripped superhero power, but he's I think he's got this kind of like laid back personality, hasn't he? Because he's always got that. Well, I can just kind of. It's almost like being able to see into the future and then kind of bring things back into the past. It's almost like a time travel power that he's got. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's in comics. I guess it's like space and time. So he's kind of he can
Yes.
do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I do like his laid back nature because there are scenes where he's doing something crazy with a supervillain and he's talking about how he has to get back because he promised he'd like help his neighbor with their garden
Yeah.
or like help his aunt or his grandmother or something like that.
And even though he's got these massive amounts of like superpowers, he is a very cerebral. Like I think the creator himself is probably a very Mr. Invincible is a very cerebral character. He's trying to use his brains to kind of like figure out how to beat the jester. Or I don't know which collection you've got, but I bought both collections, and I think in the second collection, Local Hero, he um, kind of fights against this character that's able to control colors, and he's just trying to figure it. He's trying to use his brain to kind of figure out what's the best way to get around that person's superpower.
Yes, that was a really cool. That's kind of one of the final
Yeah, I think,
strips.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
really enjoyed that. That's one of the longest ones too. Having to do with like they're talking to the military and the president, and
yeah.
it gets
Well, Barack Obama basically. And Barack
yeah,
Obama gets told off by his nan for trying to
his
militarize people's superpowers, which is I think quite a clever political statement, really.
yeah, it's amazing honestly, and it's mostly just like the ridiculous nature of the military and things like that, which I really enjoyed. And then the last gag in that is that all the president and the military are all colored pink with like flowers and hearts
Yeah,
all over them, which is a funny gag.
I'm just flicking through the book now, and I think another one of my favorite characters is the Jester's goon Grunfeld.
Yeah,
He's just this goon-looking character, but he's wearing he's kind of wearing kind of a pink apron. He's just like, oh, he very much reminds me of kind of those old Batman villain goons. It's just, gee, Bosh, what's the plan next, and all that sort of thing. So that's
that's
quite
exactly
funny.
how I read his character. That was in that kind of the hired goon.
Yeah, he's ridiculously loyal to to his master for whatever reason.
I tried to look up other stuff by this guy, and I haven't found a ton. I found one other comic that I don't think is published in English,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't. I couldn't find like I wanted to see how he got here, because he was interested in this meta type of
Yeah,
stuff.
so
But
I got the impression just from reading his Europe comics profile that he does a lot of strips in newspapers. So I think
that makes sense.
this is like a collection of strips that he's uh that's been printed in, I think, either a newspaper or a magazine. So yeah, so I think, yeah. What does it say here? It says he. Okay, so I think Mr. Invincible appears in the pages of a magazine called Spiru. So I think that's probably where he's done. But I think it does sound like from his profile that he has, you know, I think I think we were looking at doing a comic by Bruno. I think, and I've heard of Steve Baker as well. So I think, he's definitely, this is definitely very high level stuff. I mean, the
Oh
art
yeah,
is very kind of, I don't want to say Calvin and Hobbes esque, but it's kind of that nature. It's kind of very kind of classical newspaper strip style, but it's kind of very well observed, and kind of the, obviously to be able to kind of, I'm just looking at the strip where he's throwing the backpack back to back to the lady that's dropped it. So
oh
clever.
yeah,
It's so clever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I love the painting one. Like it's very early on when he like the mayor or something asks him to bring a painting back, and then he
oh yeah.
immediately hands it to himself.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the first strip in the first on the first page. That's the yeah. It's so it that kind of sets the tone for what the rest of the book's about, really.
And I would agree with you on the Calvin and Hobbes thing, especially if you look at how he draws kids. When he
Yes, yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah,
they're very Calvin and Hobbes, and I love the style. His not the rest of his figures and cartooning isn't exactly Calvin and Hobbes, but it's a very similar style, and it works. It's very clear. Um, Obviously, he's a great storyteller from panel to panel because he's got a ridiculous way of getting around that,
yeah.
which is awesome.
But I think that the artwork does need to be as clean and as simple as this artwork is, because if it was like overly detailed and you had to deal with some of the storytelling tricks that he employs to get his gag across, it might be like a bit too much.
Yeah, you don't want to draw the eye in with like super heavily detailed and penciled and like shaded art when you really are supposed to be drawing the eye with these crazy wall bending powers.
Yeah, I mean, what was the book that you was looking at when you uh, got hold of this
Toppy,
topic?
Sergio
Yeah,
Toppy.
you wouldn't want Sergio Topi doing this.
No,
It would be way too much.
it'd be like 45 minutes per page to read that. It would be
Yeah,
it
yeah,
would be
exactly.
insane.
So yeah, so I think, he just makes so many good decisions. I think this is I think this is one of those comic strips that, the academics, and if you want to learn how to write comics and draw comics, and if you're studying them either as an academic or as a creator, this is for me like a must read, because as someone who does write comics myself, it has got my brain thinking about, oh, what are the actual possibilities of format.
Yeah, that's kind of why I like it in my collection is I have several books that regardless of how much I like them or enjoy them, I love what they do with comics, and it's kind of just like an experiment you can show someone and be like, you think you know what comics are, but you haven't seen this. It's a completely new thing, and you can show them. And I think that this comic is exactly up there. with
Yes,
those things.
and I do think I'm just thinking about whether I'd show this to an older comic book reader, or would I just suggest it to like younger readers? So I mean, what I mean by an older reader is an older reader who doesn't read graphic novels or comic books, and
Yeah.
because I have spoken to people in the past where they do. Some people aren't. Uh, they're not. They don't. They're not used to reading comics, and sometimes they do struggle with layouts and things of that nature. But I think if you're a younger reader, just kind of some of the silly gags and the funny nature of the story will help you get over that bump. If you're maybe an older reader, I'm not too sure, but I think it's definitely a book that I think all our readers, all our listeners should check out. And I'm definitely going to be showing this to my nephews just to see what they think of it as well. Have you shown it to kind of like any of your kind of like younger family members or
No, I haven't
kids?
had a chance because of the whole quarantine and
Oh
everything.
yeah,
But I'm really excited. My niece and nephew, I might try and show it to them and see what they think because I'm curious because they're not like comic readers, but they probably know like left to right on the grid type stuff. I'm curious their reaction to this.
yeah. It'd be yeah. I'd be curious to find out what they think as well. So yeah, for me, this is like it was a really fun experience. I was expecting like a nice light read where I'd be able to kind of turn my turn my brain off, but kind of it does make you work a little bit for the gags, but the gags are kind of well worth it. Kind of Mr. Invincible himself is a very he's kind of a lovable character, and there's a lot of fun side characters in the book as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I would recommend this to anyone that likes a little comedy, or if you're kind of. I have a lot of friends that are into cartoons and things of that nature. They like the kind of the adult humor mixed in with the kids humor, like a SpongeBob type of deal. And I think this
Yeah,
has a tiny bit of that. There's not a ton of it, like things you're gonna miss if you're a kid, but
yeah.
um,
I think that the SpongeBob kind of like surreal, weird element, I think is very applicable to Mister Invincible.
yeah,
Um, yeah, just due to the way just due to the way he tells the story. So yeah, for me, I think I've basically said everything I wanted to say about. I think it's a really enjoyable book. It's beautifully illustrated, and it does some really innovative and fascinating things with the format. And also love the fact that it's aimed at an all age audience. It's something I'm definitely going to be looking forward to sharing with my nephews and nieces.
yeah. I agree with all those things. Those are pretty much everything that I loved about it when I first read it. So I'm glad that you liked it. Hopefully, some of the listeners will enjoy it as well. So
Cool.
yeah, I loved it.
So I think so. The next comic book, or I should say, web comic that we're going to be doing is Keith and Jeremy's Mystical Mysteries by someone called Snowy Locks, and yeah, so that's going to be. It's just because it's a webtoon. I don't think we'll do everything up to date, but we'll let we'll decide how many of the episodes that we're going to do. So Snowy's a listener of ours, and he's one of our supporters. So I think it's only fair that we give him a shout out and kind of promote his webcomic on our podcast as well. If there are any listeners who do have webcomics or comic books or graphic novels or Kickstarters that they're planning on launching, please do get in touch via social media or email to let us know. We'd be more than happy to promote your stuff.
I would love to. I'm excited to read Snowy stuff. So I can't wait
Okay,
for that.
that's it. That's it, guys. Just a couple of small plugs for my other podcast. So I did a really fun interview with comedian Sam White for my podcast Inconstant, and for Audiobookish, my audiobook review podcast, I recently interviewed Samantha Hunter, who is the author of Flamingo Fashion, which is a fantastic little audiobook for children. So please check those out. Anything to shout out, Carl?
Not yet. I'm thinking I'll hopefully. I'm working on another podcast with some friends of mine. It's either going to be about movies or it's going to be about anything at all. So keep your eyes out or your ears out, I guess, for that, because we're not exactly sure yet.
Okay, that's it, guys. Thank you for the support. Some of you guys are using our affiliate link to subscribe to the podcast, and that's kind of paying for the podcast. So we really do appreciate that. I know everyone's this time of like COVID-19 might be struggling for money a little bit, but thank you so much for the financial support that you've given us.
Yeah, thanks a ton, guys. It really helps us out. Lets us keep making this, which we enjoy doing. So
okay, that's it, guys. Thank you so much, and bye.
Thanks for listening, guys.